Hi everybody, welcome back. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about a new makeup project that I'm going to be undertaking in 2023, and it is the Pan in Every Palette challenge. Now I'm a project panner, I've been doing it for about 2 years now, but I am not a big eyeshadow wearer. It's not one of my favourite parts of makeup to buy or to play with or to wear. I'm quite lazy when it comes to doing my makeup, so I don't always have time or can always be bothered to wear eyeshadow. However, I have noticed that I have added in a few eyeshadows into my collection recently. I've got 2 new eyeshadow palettes, I've got 3 loose pigments, so glitter pigments, and I've got 3 new single eyeshadows that I've added into my collection. So for somebody who doesn't really wear eyeshadow that often, that's a lot of eyeshadow to be adding into my collection. So I did also kind of realise that I have very few pans in my eyeshadow collection. So I thought this would be a really good challenge to set myself to start using all of my eyeshadow palettes, because I tend to only wear a couple. I tend to kind of reach for the same few eyeshadow palettes, so unless I include them in things like a Shop My Stash or an eyeshadow roulette, they don't get touched that often. So next year I want to use all of these palettes and I want to start getting more pans in my eyeshadows. So within my makeup inventory I have 1 eyeshadow duo, 7 eyeshadow palettes, 2 face and eye palettes and 13 single eyeshadows. I do also have 3 eyeshadow sticks and 3 of those loose glitter pigments, but for this challenge, for this pan in every palette, in every eyeshadow palette rather, challenge, I'm not going to include the glitters and I'm not going to include the eyeshadow sticks. It's just powder eyeshadows that I'm going to be focusing on. So out of those eyeshadow palettes, the singles, the duos, I have in total 108 individual eyeshadow pans. And out of those 108 eyeshadow pans, I have hit pan in a grand total of 1 pan. And that is the pan that is in my project pan. It is MAC Shroom. Now don't get me wrong, I'm glad I've hit pan in that project pan item, but the fact that I've hit pan in just 1 eyeshadow out of all of the eyeshadows I own, I actually feel a little bit bad about that, a bit embarrassed. So the fact that I've only hit pan in 1 of my 108 eyeshadows gives me a grand percentage, a pan percentage of 0.93%, which is awful. So I'm really hoping by the end of this challenge that pan percentage will be a lot higher. As a project panner, I should really have hit pan in more eyeshadows than that. So that really is why I want to set myself this challenge next year. So what I'm going to do in today's video, I'm going to show you the eyeshadow palettes that I'm going to focus on and the individual eyeshadow shades from within each palette that I want to hit pan on. So let's start off with the eyeshadow duo. I have one, it's by Nars and it's in the shade Isolde, and I have had this for quite a few years now and I love this little eyeshadow duo. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So the pan that I want to choose, that I want to focus on, the one that I want to hit pan on, is this one here, the left hand side one, which is the lighter of the two. This is a real true warm orange gold shade, and I do have a good dip in this, and actually I have a good dip in quite a few of my eyeshadows, so I think with some of them I'm going to be able to hit pan fairly soon. So although I've only hit pan in 1 of my eyeshadows, there are quite a few in these palettes that I am very close to hitting pan on. So that actually is quite reassuring, that is quite promising. So this one is the shade that I'm going to be focusing on for this Nars palette. Now this little palette here, this is the one that I tend to kind of focus on in the autumn and in the winter months. So December at the moment, this is the type of eyeshadow shade I like to wear for those festive looks, but this one can work really quite well in the summer as well. So not too sure if I'm going to hit pan on this in the first 6 months. I might, but because I tend to wear this more in autumn, December and maybe a little bit in the summer as well, I think this one will get more use in those months at those times of year. Okay, let's move on to the eyeshadow palettes then, and another one that I have had in my collection for quite a few years is the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. This is the palette that is full of all of those oranges, burgundies, rust colours, a very warm palette. Now I don't really use a lot of the shimmers in this palette, so the shade that I'm going to be focusing on is one of the matte shades. And how I've tried to choose the shade in each palette is which shade has the biggest dip in it, which shade am I closest to hitting pan on, but I also want to make sure that I've got a variety of different colours to be focusing on as well. So the shades that I do have the most pan on usually are the matte ivory shades, because that's a shade that I tend to wear a lot because it's a good all over the lid colour. I've got one of those shades on today, but it's also a really good base pigment for other colours over the top. But I don't want to be panning, you know, 10 of those different eyeshadow shades, so I do have different shades that I am going to be panning. But the shade in the Naked Heat palette that I'm going to be panning is this second one in here, which is called Chaser, and that is one of those matte ivory shades. This is a little bit warm as well, and this one has a really good pan in it, so I think this one will be one of the earliest and one of the quickest shades for me to be able to hit pan on, because this is the type of shade that I will be wearing regardless of whatever eyeshadow look I'm wearing. Next palette is my Vive Essentials palette. So this is a neutrals palette, very warm, like an everyday easy eyeshadow look. And there were a couple of shades in here that I thought I could include, one of which is again one of those matte ivory shades, So Shy up here, but I've got Chaser from Urban Decay Naked Heat. So my crease shade is going to come from this palette. So this will be the shade Buff. This is a beautiful crease shade. This is one of the shades in this palette that I tend to reach for. So whenever I use this palette, 9 times out of 10 I end up using Buff. So again, this should be a fairly easy one for me to be able to hit pan on. However, these pans are huge. These are big pans. Now it might be a fact as well that they're very wide but not very deep, so I might be able to hit pan on it kind of easily, especially as it is that crease shade as well. But this is the shade that I'm going to be focusing on from Vive Essentials. And from the Vive Muse palette, the pinky purple one, I've set myself a little bit of a difficult shade to use. So again, there were a couple of shades in here that I could have used. I could have gone for Divine, the sparkly pink one, or Peony, which is a matte light pink, a warm pink. But the pan in here that I have used the most is in fact Regal, which is this shimmery, very warm purple shade. And that's because this was one of the shades in my eyeshadow roulette from this year. So I do have a nice little dip going on. It's not that big of a dip, so this one I think will be one of the last ones that I will end up hitting pan on, especially as well because it isn't the type of shade that I tend to go for every day. It's not a neutral warm brown shade, it is a little bit more out of my comfort zone, but actually it's a really, really pretty colour and it looks lovely with my green eyes as well. So if I can push myself to wear this one more regularly, then hopefully I can hit pan on this one quicker than I'm expecting to. So I've got a couple of ABH palettes next. First up is Novena, and these palettes I think are very, very easy to hit pan on. Now, although I don't wear eyeshadow that often, I have made good progress in both of these eyeshadow palettes that I'm going to talk about. Now, the one in Novena that I'm going to focus on is the shade Rose Gold, which is one of the shimmery shades. And again, I think Rose Gold must have been included in one of my eyeshadow roulette videos because I've got a really nice pan going on in it. And these shimmers in the Novena palette are very, very soft and they're very easy to see progress like right away. So this is one that I'm hoping I can get through fairly quickly. And if I can wear this one with Regal from the Vive Muse palette, those two together I think will look really beautiful. And the size of these pans are a lot smaller than the ones in the two Vive palettes, so I might be able to get through them a lot quicker that way as well, just because the fact that they're that bit smaller. Now, once I have hit pan on my chosen shade, I'll then work on another shade in the palette as well. I won't then put the palette to one side, I'll start working on another colour, but I haven't thought that far ahead about what colour that will be. That will just be what one looks like I can get good progress on next at the time. So for now in Novena it's gonna be Rose Gold. So I've got Modern Renaissance as well, and there were a few in here that I thought I could include. So I could have gone for Tempera, but I've already got Chaser from Urban Decay Naked Heat, which is that matte ivory shade. I could have gone for Primavera, which is a shimmery warm champagne shade, it's like an inner corner, but I have another shade similar to that that's coming up. And the one that I have settled on is another one that was in my eyeshadow roulette video, so again I've got a nice dip going on in that, and it's Buon Fresco, which is a kind of a cool toned matte lilac shade, but that's a really good crease shade, a good base shade for incorporating the other pinks and reds and purples in this palette. So when I chose my shades, I tried to think as well, can I wear a lot of these shades together? So if I wanted a pinky purpley look, I can go for Buon Fresco. I can pair that with Rose Gold from Novena. I can also pair it with Regal from Vive Muse. So a lot of the colours that I've chosen in this challenge do work really well together. So I think that's also going to help me hit and pan on a lot of them as well. So in this palette then, Buon Fresco. So there are two other eyeshadow palettes within my collection. They are these two here that I've had videos on recently, which I will link. Now these are both probably 2 months old max, so they are very, very new into my collection. So I'm not going to include an eyeshadow colour from these palettes within the first 6 months of this challenge. Once we get to June, July of next year, I then might start to include one shade within these palettes, and that's just because a lot of the eyeshadows I'm going to talk about today are a little bit old. They are kind of getting on a little bit now, so I don't want them to get wasted. I don't want them to start to deteriorate in quality. So my focus with this challenge are on my older eyeshadows, not my new ones. But because they're new, because I do still want to keep trying them and getting them used, I will probably include them in things like Shop My Stashes, or I'll just dip in and out of them as I want to. The first one is the Revolution Reloaded Hypnotic palette that I got as a dupe for ABH Sultry. The quality is okay. You do have to work a little bit harder to get pigment with the shimmer shades, but the mattes are absolutely fine. And then the next one I got was a dupe for ABH Soft Glam, which is Wet n Wild, my Glamour squad. So yeah, they both are quite new. So I think from June, July next year, I will include one shade in each of these palettes to focus on. So within my collection, I've got 13 individual single eyeshadows, and that means that they don't come as part of a palette. I've bought them as individual pans. So what I have done for this challenge is I've grouped all of these single eyeshadows together into one palette. And that includes my MAC single eyeshadows, which I said at the beginning is the one shade that I've hit pan on, which is this one here, MAC Shroom. So I have already hit pan in an eyeshadow from my singles collection. So I'm not going to choose another eyeshadow within the singles to be working on, but I think I might do the same thing as I've just mentioned for the two new eyeshadow palettes. From June, July next year, I might choose another shade to be working on, because I've got some shades in here that are getting a little bit old now. These are my MAC singles and a couple of my Makeup Geek singles. The quality is still absolutely fine, the quality is still brilliant, but I might then choose another one of these to be working on. And I do also have some new shades. I've got a couple of Kiko ones, and I've got a Lisa Eldridge one, a single that I bought. So I have no sense of urgency, no rush to hit pan on my three new ones. So I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of an easy win and say that I have hit pan in my collection of single eyeshadows. So I'm not going to choose a new one to be working on now, but like I say, halfway into the challenge next year, I will probably pick one of the ones in here to work on. So lastly, I've got two face and eye palettes. They are both by Laura Geller. First up, I've got the TGI Thursday one, which is a little bit more of a vampy one, maybe one that's a bit more kind of suited to like a date night perhaps. And you've got 4 eyeshadow singles, you've got a blusher and a highlighter, and they're designed to all work cohesively together. And the shade that I've decided to work on is Toasted Taupe, which is this one here, and I think this was another one that was included in my eyeshadow roulette. So I do have a good dip going on this one here. And this is a really beautiful one shade and done eyeshadow look. I think I included this one in my Get Ready With Me wedding guest. I think it was this eyeshadow that I used. It's a beautiful shimmer, it's a lovely, lovely colour. And these palettes are a little bit old now as well. I think they're probably about 4 or 5 years old, so I do want to start, you know, hitting pan on some of these as well. And also in the blushes and the highlighters as well. And then the last one is Sunday Fun Day. This is my kind of colour in here. So warm browns, oranges, coppers, gold. I love every single shade within this palette. And the shade that I have decided to work on is the shade Golden Girl, which is that shimmery, quite yellow actually, champagne ivory kind of shade. So that would be a great all over the lid, one shade and done, or under your brow bone or in the inner corner of your eyes, and maybe as a highlighter as well. So if it works as a highlighter, that's another way I can get this one used up. And this will be the kind of shade that I can wear every time I wear my makeup, regardless of if I'm doing eyeshadow or not. So if it's a very similar look, very simple look as to what I've got on today, I can whack some of this on in the inner corner and under my brow bone and try to make it work as a highlighter as well. So this one should be a fairly easy one to hit pan on. So those were all of the shades and all of the palettes that I am focusing on next year. So it does sound like a lot of eyeshadow pans that I'm trying to hit pan on, but I think the fact that I've included lots of different colours might help. I think if I was including, you know, 3 matte ivory shades, it would take me a lot longer to see pan on them or to see progress on them, but I have tried to include different formulations and different colours as well, so there's a variety of different eyeshadow looks that I can create with the ones that I have chosen. So I think what I'm going to do an introductory video for next year, because I think this video was just me trying to like explain it and explain what kind of vision I've got for next year for my eyeshadow palettes and introduce you to the shades. But with the next video, with the introductory pan in every eyeshadow palette video, I'll take a picture of the individual eyeshadow so you can see how they look, and then I'll give monthly updates like I do with my project pan, so you can see month by month how I'm progressing and how I'm hopefully making progress on all of the shades as well. If you've done a challenge like this, if you've done a pan in every palette video, please let me know how it went for you. If you've got any tips or tricks, anything that might help me with my progress, I'd really appreciate your comments. Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again very soon for my next one.